So for the brackets, we're going to use a couple different techniques and then also look at it in the same strategy of the configuration. And as we go through the process, our thicknesses are all staying the same, 10 millimeters, 10 millimeters, and the bar is going the other way. So we'll start off with the create the first geometry and then build on from there. So opening up a sketch on the front, and let's just start with the L. Alright, so one process would be to set these to equal, and then because this is an open profile, if I go into the extrude, it's automatically going to default to the thin feature. I'm not going to be able to uncheck. And the thin feature is fine. I'm going to set to midplane, and then our midplane is a depth of 30. And so it's a very quick way of creating the geometry. And we go ahead and accept. And then for the hole locations, let's see, it's 15 millimeters in and 15, so we could say that the through holes are centered on those faces. That might get us into trouble later, but I shouldn't have to make too many changes here. So one option would be to center line. I kind of prefer the corner to corner. And then that will allow it to center. Let's see which one did not pick up the relation. There we go. Just kind of dragging over, hovering until it finds it. And then we'll set the smart dimension of 10. And then features extrude cut through. And we'll let it go through all. Alright, and then the next sketch, and mainly this is for convenience of centering on that face. If we happen to pick this side, then I'm going to lose some of that that relation. So I would have to either go into wireframe and pick up that edge. Well, let's go ahead and do that. We'll get out of that one real quick, and if I came over to the back side, I could still do the same types of things. But I would need to be in my wireframe, which is the same as coming over to the display and picking hidden lines visible. And then I can find the midpoint. Oh, I picked it, but it did not start the line. And then if we went midpoint to midpoint as opposed to corner, we end up with the same net result. But the perception is still that I'm on the back, which is always interesting to kind of get if that gets flipped around on you. So 10 millimeters, and we'll go ahead and extrude cut that through. Alright, so that gives me the L bracket. We'll go back in and save, and so we'll set up our L bracket. Looking at the Z bracket, then we have still the 30 millimeter width, 40 on both legs, so there's a little bit of an offset. So if I was to do the thin feature, I would just have to shorten that one a little bit. Next one I want to do the offset, so I'm still going to have to generate that geometry and create the offset. So let's go ahead and close. I could do the save as and continue and try to pick those up. Now let's see what that looks like. Now if we just start over, then I have to create that geometry. So if we stayed with the thin feature here, then I can do a save as and as copy and open, and then this becomes the Z bracket. And save, and I think this one will be a little easier than the C bracket to pick up. So if I go back into the thin feature and edit it, then the overall height changed. So since I added that relation, we're going to need a 30 millimeter here. I need to remove the equal relation. So if I highlight it from the icon, or I highlight the line and come over to the property manager and hit delete, either way we'll get that out of the mix. Alright, so actually 40 and 10, well, didn't need to do that. I didn't do my math, so and once we add the 10 millimeters, it'll be right there. So if I do a Control-Z, just to do a quick verification, length is 40, goes out the other 10. We'll go ahead and see what it did. So warning, and this is something that we kind of expect when we start manipulating these, that if the geometry changes, if it does something, it loses track of those elements, then we're going to see something, a piece of geometry go to underdefined or can't be resolved. Alright, so we picked that one, and what I did was identify the amber. So I'll go a little slower on this one, and we'll edit the sketch. It says it no longer exists. So at the very top there is the amber dot. That's usually the best indication, and then when we come over to the existing relations, it shows the midpoint as having picked up, and it really wouldn't have mattered if I'd gone to the corner. It probably still would have done the same thing. So let's see if we can pick that up, and between the two. Alright, and then the next one would be that since this sketch started here and went down, I wouldn't necessarily be able to bring it over, but if I wanted to, I can, obvious choice is just to start a new sketch and put the third hole over here. But if I wanted to be, try to be a little more creative and make it more complicated, let's go back and add in that center line, create the circle, set them to equal, and then it doesn't bark at me, but it also doesn't create the hole. And what I'm looking at here is when I edit the feature, I'm showing on the preview that they're both going down. Well, this one's out in space, and it doesn't really, it's not cutting anything, but it's not creating an error either. If I go to through all both then, and then accept, it should find its way up and down through the Z. Alright, so we'll hit the Control-S to save that one. And then with the C bracket, I think I'm just going to do the offset for the example. And so we'll stay with the front plane. And if I'm doing the outside or the inside, I can decide pretty quick here. And I want those, one of the ways I can set them to be equal is just to make the points vertical. And because the long line here is vertical, that's also going to keep the equal. So if I set them equal, that works. If I leave it and use the points, it has the same net effect. So let's see if we fly that in real quick. Alright, so the C bracket then is also 50 tall, 40 on the legs, 30 on the width. Alright, so 40 is my outside, 50 is my height, and then when we select one of the objects to do the offset entities, we have chain selected, so it's not just going to do the one. 10 millimeters is the depth, and if the geometry is, I'm trying to think what case the construction geometry won't be available. If it's not able to cap it, then those will not be available. Alright, so, the construction geometry is to change the base into construction lines or change the offset geometry into construction lines, or both. Depends on what we're building. Alright, so capping the ends with arcs makes the full radiuses, which looks kind of cool, but we really just want the lines to make it consistent, not have to draw those in later. Alright, so with that, we're going to get an offset relation, offset distance, and offset, offset distance, and offset, and one more. Alright, so features, extrude. I still like the midplane, and then we can go to 30 millimeters on our width and create the set. Alright, so from the bottom this time, so that I can just sketch through. Alright, so there's nothing wrong with setting those dimensions. Just if we go back and we make a design review and say, you know, instead of 30 it goes to 40 or down to 20, then I have to come back and I have to change these dimensions. I don't get that automatic update. Alright, so that one goes features, extrude cut through all, and it's going to find the end geometry. So just a quick reference, up to next is going to stop at the next face. Through all goes to the last piece of geometry and cuts through everything. Alright, and then my sketch. And I would say try to be consistent when you're making those picks. If there's a problem, at least it will be a consistent problem, and once you diagnose, you get kind of a sense what's going on. Alright, so diameters 10, and then since it didn't go fully defined, then somewhere I did not get the midpoint. So I'm going to do a select, control select, and I will go back and force the midpoint, and then we'll extrude cut and give it the through all. Alright, and then we can save this one. As long as I don't get too carried away, I can pick the previous name and tell it that this is now the C bracket. Alright, so the next video we'll do is a configuration, which is a little bit different, but that gives us our shapes in a couple different ways to approach the solution.